December 1942. Somewhere along the River Tees in northern England, the air cuts sharp against the metal sheds of the experimental bridging establishment. Inside, beneath rows of sodium lamps, a small group of engineers gather around a wooden table. On it lies a structure no larger than a child's toy, two latticed panels joined by brass pins, their edges clipped into a row of miniature rollers. Donald Bailey, a civil engineer in his late 30s, watches in silence as two technicians begin to load sandbags on top of the model. The bridge flexes, but does not fail. The men exchange glances. One of them, Captain Davidson, notes the deflection with a pencil on his clipboard. 3.5 inches, he mutters. Bailey adjusts his glasses, eyes steady. The miniature truss sways slightly, the sandbags pushing down harder. It holds. The room remains quiet except for the faint buzz of the lamps and the clicking of typewriter keys in the adjacent office. Outside, frost coats the corrugated walls. The war has entered its fourth winter. The British Army, advancing through North Africa and preparing for an eventual return to Europe, faces a problem that can't be solved with bombs or tanks, rivers. German demolitions have destroyed nearly every crossing from Tunisia to the Seine. Permanent bridges require weeks of construction and tons of steel. Field bridges are too light to bear tanks. Bailey's proposal, a prefabricated, modular truss assembled by hand, seems absurd to many officers. Yet here, in the cold testing shed, the model behaves with precision. When the sandbags are replaced by a scaled-down Churchill tank made from solid lead, the small rollers creak and the panel joints settle by millimeters, then stabilize. The technicians measure again. The load is equivalent to more than 40 tons at full scale. Bailey writes nothing. He simply watches. Years earlier, as a county engineer, he had sketched this same concept on a notepad, a bridge so simple that untrained men could build it without cranes, welding, or special tools. Each section identical, pinned and bolted into longer spans, carried on trucks, and locked together like a child's construction set. He had called it the portable panel bridge, but few took notice. The army wanted proven designs, not eccentric theories drawn in pencil. A gust of wind rattles the shed door. Snow drifts across the yard, gathering against crates marked Royal Engineers, Classified. Nearby, another team loads a full-scale prototype onto a truck. It takes 8 men less than half an hour. No rivets, no welding torches, just bolts and muscle. When assembled across the test channel, it carries a 6-ton truck with no visible sag. The men record the deflection, dismantle it, and rebuild it again. At 15:30, the chief inspector arrives from London, Colonel Sir Vivian Henderson. His overcoat is soaked from sleet. He steps close to the model, studies the pin joints, and asks a single question: can this be built under fire? Bailey answers with the same calm tone that has marked his entire career. Yes, sir. If they can hold a spanner, they can build it. By dusk, the decision is made. The prototype will go to the Corps of Royal Engineers for field trials. Outside, the cranes lower full-size steel panels onto wooden skids. Each panel measures 10 feet long, 5 feet high, and weighs just over 600 pounds. The men work in silence, breath clouding in the cold air. In the distance, freight trains move along the dark horizon, carrying tanks, ammunition, and fuel, the machinery of a vast, unseen invasion still months away. Amid them, one small train carries a stack of experimental bridge panels marked Bailey Type, Field Test. No one outside this compound yet knows it, but these simple frames of steel will soon carry the entire Allied advance across every river, canal, and ravine between Normandy and Berlin. Fade to black. The clatter of bolts echoes against the night, as if the war itself were assembling its next weapon, not of destruction, but of passage. March 1943. The mud around the river Medjurda in Tunisia clings thick to boots and tires. The 8th Army's engineers move in silence, sleeves rolled high, their hands raw from cold steel. A column of Matilda tanks waits on the opposite bank, their tracks idling in the brown water. The last stone bridge had been dropped by retreating Germans only hours before. Every route forward is blocked by rivers and craters. From a convoy of Bedford lorries, the panels arrive, long rectangles of dull-painted steel. The markings read Bailey Bridge, Portable Section, MKI. No cranes follow, no generators, no rivet crews. Just men, wrenches, and sheer persistence. The commanding officer, Major S. G. Smith, consults his notebook. Each bay must reach 30 feet. 3 bays will span the river. Total assembly time, 2 hours. The ground vibrates as tanks test their brakes. The smell of petrol hangs thick in the air. Sergeant Price opens the crate and checks the panel joints. Holes align precisely, the bolts slide through with a hammer tap. 2 sappers lift each frame, hook the pins through, and tighten with hand spanners. There is no instruction manual, only memory and repetition. Each man has drilled this in the desert under Bailey's supervision. The bridge grows forward, pushed on rollers from the near bank. A series of clanks echoes across the water as the panels lock together. Wooden transoms are laid, followed by steel stringers, then planks. The structure extends like a giant mechanical tongue. It flexes but does not fail. The men say little. A line of riflemen watch from behind sandbags, scanning the far bank for movement. By 1620, the final bay reaches the opposite side. Sappers fix the bearing plates and remove the rollers. The bridge settles with a low metallic groan. Major Smith signals to the tank crews. A Churchill rumbles forward, treads grinding against the planks. The water below shakes with the vibration. Midway across, the sound changes, a deep hum rising from the steel lattice, as if the structure itself were alive. The tank reaches the far bank without slowing. The men cheer once, quietly, then resume tightening the bolts. From his observation post on the ridge, Colonel Henderson records the time, 1 hour, 38 minutes. No machinery, no casualties. Bridge holds, he notes in his log. Recommend immediate mass production. 2 months later, Bailey himself inspects a new span built near Tripoli. The engineers salute as he walks its length, counting panels. He notes where the pins have been replaced by locally forged bolts, where the decking has been reinforced with captured German planks. The design is already evolving. Every part can be substituted, every error corrected on site. A private shows him a trick, using a bayonet to align bolt holes faster. Bailey says nothing, just smiles faintly and adds it to his notes. Back in England, factories run day and night. Women welders and machine operators assemble 10-foot panels in endless rows. Each bears a serial number and inspection stamp. By summer, 200,000 panels have left the works. In August, the first combat-tested Bailey Bridge goes into record. The official War Office photograph shows a Matilda crossing a dusty span under the caption Portable Bridge, North Africa, successful trial. The image travels through newspapers in London, but few readers grasp its meaning. They see steel and mud. Engineers see freedom of movement. By autumn, Bailey bridges cross Sicily and southern Italy. Reports describe their modular miracle, able to span gaps up to 200 feet with nothing more than manpower. Commanders start requesting them by name. Send us a Bailey becomes shorthand for we can keep moving. The field reports show no failures. Even when tanks outrun the sappers, the bridges hold. The war's geography begins to bend under their efficiency. Rivers cease to be obstacles, they become intervals. The design, once dismissed as crazy, is proving itself one crossing at a time, a silent, precise rhythm of bolts, pins, and progress pushing north through Europe's rivers toward an invasion still being drawn on maps. By early 1944, the Bailey Bridge had moved beyond experiment and field improvisation. It had become a weapon of logistics, a machine for movement. At the Royal Engineers Depot in Christchurch, Dorset, production records filled entire ledgers. Each page showed panel shipments, tonnage, and destinations. Between January and May alone, more than 490,000 bridge components were issued to the British and American armies. Each panel weighed 570 pounds. Each could be lifted by 6 men. On factory floors from Darlington to Glasgow, women in overalls lined up at presses, stamping steel lugs and punching bolt holes in perfect rhythm. Rivet smoke rose into rafters. Wooden crates labeled panel, bridge, Bailey type, Class 40 were loaded onto rail wagons, bound for southern ports. Each complete bridge, enough to carry a 40-ton tank, required roughly 15 tons of steel and 2,000 bolts. Assembly time under training averaged 3 hours per 80-foot span. These numbers mattered. Operation overlord depended on them. Allied planners, led by the combined chiefs of staff, calculated that every division landing in France would need at least 6 complete Bailey sets to maintain its advance. Without them, tanks would be stranded at the first French river. Logistics officers began referring to bridges as tonnage multipliers, not glamorous, but decisive. In a damp workshop near Portsmouth, a young sapper named George Barker recalled his training notes: "If it fits the pins, it's a Bailey." He and his crew practiced blindfold assembly to simulate night operations. They learned to feel for the pinholes, slide the cord bars, and hammer the locking wedges in sequence. Each sound had meaning: the metallic ring of the joint, the hollow thud of the transom. It was mechanical music, audible proof that the line could move again. During the D-Day build-up, Bailey sections were stacked across every airfield and dockyard in southern England. American GIs called them Meccano bridges. In one warehouse, a test span carried a Sherman tank driven repeatedly back and forth for 12 hours without visible wear. Inspectors noted deflection less than 1 inch at full load. The bridge's strength lay not in weight, but in geometry, the overlapping trusses forming triangles that distributed stress along every chord. Mathematical analysis confirmed it: a triple-single configuration could bear 70 tons. The double-triple extended that to 120. No welds, no cranes. The Bailey relied purely on compression, tension, and human muscle. Even damaged sections could be cannibalized, a field-built redundancy that astonished German engineers later inspecting captured examples. In June 1944, when the first convoys rolled ashore in Normandy, the Bailey followed close behind. Within 48 hours of landing, engineers had spanned the Orne Canal under fire. In aerial photographs, the bridge appears as a thin silver line over water, insignificant until one considers what it carried: 37 tanks, 60 trucks, and thousands of men in the first day alone. Reports from the 79th Armored Division called it the bridge that never waits. General Montgomery's staff listed it as a strategic constant, as essential as fuel or ammunition. Through the summer, Bailey bridges multiplied across France, over the Seine at Vernon, the Somme at Amiens, the Meuse near Liege. Each crossing recorded in field logs by hour, minute, and load capacity. Some stood for only days before being dismantled and carried forward. Others remained in use for decades. By winter, Allied forces had built over 3,000 Bailey bridges, spanning nearly 55 miles of total length. The data astonished the War Office. Not one complete failure had been reported under load. Donald Bailey, still a quiet man in his Dorset office, read the numbers without comment. He marked a single note in the margin of his technical report. Structure, satisfactory. Further field adaptation continues. The language was typical of him, calm, factual, almost indifferent. But the implication was vast. The portable bridge had outgrown its inventor. It was no longer an experiment, but an artery of the Allied war machine, a geometry of progress stretching across a continent in ruins. May 1945. The war in Europe is ending. Across the Rhine, rivers that once marked front lines now run silent under the weight of steel and current. Along their banks, hundreds of Bailey bridges remain, some still bearing tanks, others serving as civilian crossings for refugees and supply convoys. The last German surrender is only days old, yet the bridges already belong to another era. Their trusses are coated in dust, their decking grooved by endless treads. At the Royal Engineers headquarters in Ripon, clerks compile the final tallies. Over 5,000 Bailey bridges built in the European theatre. Combined length, more than 100 miles. The heaviest recorded crossing, at Ries over the Rhine, had carried a continuous convoy of armoured divisions for 72 hours without interruption. In the post-operation report, a single line appears beneath the summary, "All bridges satisfactory." Donald Bailey receives the telegram while seated at his drafting table. The message is brief, an invitation to Buckingham Palace for the award of the Commander of the Order of the British Empire. When colleagues congratulate him, he deflects with a simple phrase, "It worked because men believed it would." The following week, newspapers print his photograph, a mild-looking engineer in round spectacles, standing beside a bridge frame. To the public, his name appears only once among the thousands of honors that fill the page. But among engineers, his invention alters everything. Military design doctrine shifts overnight. Bridges are no longer static constructions, they are mobile assets, part of a moving battlefield. Manuals begin to use a new term, mechanized bridging. Armies around the world copy the design. The Americans keep building them into the 1950s. Canada constructs one across the Rhine in peacetime to test its limits. It carries a 100-ton locomotive without bending. In India, the design becomes the foundation of the country's post-war infrastructure program, linking towns where permanent bridges had never existed. Back in Britain, the prototypes remain at Christchurch, lined in rows of rusted steel. Bailey returns there briefly in late 1945. The yard is quiet except for the wind moving through empty panels. He studies one of the original test spans, the same design he built from wood and brass 3 years earlier. The bolts still turn smoothly. He runs his hand along the truss and notes how the paint has flaked, but the geometry endures. In a report to the War Office that winter, he recommends improvements for civilian use, lighter alloys, modular decking, standardized pin joints. His closing line is understated, design remains effective under variable conditions. The Royal Engineers Museum preserves his notebooks, small, square pages filled with pencil sketches and calculations. No slogans, no personal remarks, only measurements and angles. On one margin, faint and nearly erased, is a line written in his hand. Bridges should be built as if time were short. That principle outlived the war. In Korea, Vietnam, and the Falklands, soldiers still assemble Baileys under fire. Even into the 21st century, humanitarian teams have used them to replace flood-damaged crossings from Pakistan to Ukraine. Some of those bridges trace their bolts directly to 1943 stock. There was no grand unveiling, no cinematic finale. The Bailey Bridge's triumph was quiet, measured in tons crossed and hours saved. In photographs of the Allied advance, it is rarely the focus, a shadow beneath the tanks, a line of triangles over grey water. Yet its presence defines every frame. The war ended because armies could move, and they moved because one man refused to abandon a crazy idea drawn in pencil on a winter night in a cold English shed. Fade to silence. The steel lattice glints once more in the morning light, the sound of the river steady beneath, the calm rhythm of a world rebuilding itself, one span at a time. Summer 1946. The war is over, yet the world remains built upon its machinery. Along railways and rivers from Holland to Burma, the Bailey Bridge has refused to retire. British sappers now find themselves working beside civilian crews, disassembling spans that have carried more convoys than anyone can count. Children cross them to school. Farmers drive tractors over decking once rattled by Churchill tanks. At a reconstruction meeting in Brussels, engineers debate whether these temporary military bridges should be replaced with permanent concrete spans. The reports tell a different story. Most of the Baileys still hold their full rated loads, some exceeding 20 months of continuous service. A Belgian inspector writes, "None show measurable fatigue." His pencil underline remains visible in the archived copy. In Italy, a Bailey built over the Sangro River becomes the region's main highway crossing for the next decade. The same panels, warped by heat and shellfire, continue to function, bolts tightening against time itself. A local mayor sends a letter to the British Embassy in 1948, "Tell Mr. Bailey that his bridge has outlasted the peace treaties." Back in England, the Bailey design migrates into textbooks. Civil engineers study it not as a wartime relic, but as a proof of modularity, how structure can be simplified without weakness. The concept inspires later prefabricated systems, the Acro Bridge, the Callender Hamilton Truss, even elements of early oil platform supports. Each traces its lineage to Bailey's lattice geometry, triangles distributing stress through symmetry. At the Christchurch depot, production finally halts. The last wartime panels, painted olive drab, are stacked and inventoried for future emergencies. A few are sent to newly independent nations under Commonwealth aid programs. In Malaya, British instructors teach local engineers to build them for flood relief. In Kenya, they span gorges where no permanent bridges yet exist. The Bailey becomes a quiet ambassador, a weapon-turned instrument of repair. Donald Bailey, meanwhile, moves to the Ministry of Supply. His office is modest, lined with blueprints and filing cabinets. He receives requests from universities and foreign governments for lectures, but rarely accepts. When pressed for comment by journalists, he answers with measured precision, "It worked because it was simple. That is all." His voice, captured on an early BBC radio interview, carries no trace of pride or sentiment, only the cadence of fact. In 1952, a major flood cuts through the east coast of England, destroying dozens of civilian bridges. Within 48 hours, Bailey spans, some reassembled from wartime stock, reopen the routes. Photographs show villagers walking across them with bicycles and carts, unaware that they tread on remnants of the Western Front. The same bolts, the same trusses, the same measured strength. By the mid-1950s, the bridge becomes part of daily language. To Bailey it means to improvise a solution quickly and effectively. The name enters dictionaries as both noun and verb. Engineering journals begin referring to the design as a field classic, equal in impact to the steam engine and the screw propeller. In the Royal Engineers Museum, the original wooden model, Bailey's first, sits under glass. Its brass pins still turn, the miniature rollers still move. A small plaque beneath reads simply, "Bailey Bridge Model, 1940, tested, proven, used." When visitors ask how such a simple design could change the course of a war, guides point to its geometry, order within pressure, precision within chaos. That is where its legacy rests, not in triumph, but in endurance. The Bailey Bridge was never meant to be beautiful. Yet decades later, its pattern of triangles has become a quiet emblem of strength, a shape that carried armies across continents, and afterward, carried the world itself across the ruins of war. Spring, 2024. In the mountains of northern Pakistan, heavy rains wash away a concrete bridge that once linked two valleys. Within days, a convoy of trucks arrives carrying steel panels painted in faded military green. Each bears a stamped number, Bailey Bridge Panel, MK2, 1943. Local engineers unload them by hand, laying out the components on the roadside. The same rhythm that once echoed through Tunisia, Normandy, and the Rhine now returns to the sound of hammers and pins. A generation after its invention, the Bailey Bridge still performs the same function it did under fire, restoring movement where it's been lost. The manuals have changed little. The pin joints, the lattice pattern, even the terminology remain intact. Chord, transom, sway brace. The engineers recite the parts like a litany of continuity. Within 12 hours, the span is complete. Children cross it carrying school bags. The only difference from 1943 is that the men now wear reflective vests instead of helmets. Around the world, the pattern repeats. In 2015, Nepalese soldiers used Bailey panels to reconnect mountain towns cut off by earthquakes. In 2020, British troops deploy them for flood relief in Yorkshire. In 2022, Ukrainian engineers assemble one over the Irpin River, the same river where the old highway bridge was destroyed by shellfire. In every photograph, the geometry is unmistakable, the same triangles, the same parallel chords, the same silent proof that one design can outlast the politics that created it. At the Royal Engineers Museum, visitors stand before the original drawings. Bailey's pencil lines have yellowed with age, but the measurements remain crisp, 10 feet per panel, 600 pounds, for bolts per joint. The archivist turns a page to a wartime memo from 1943, ease of construction paramount. If one man can do it in the dark, the bridge will succeed. Historians now describe the Bailey Bridge as the most successful military engineering design in history. Not because of its novelty, but because of its permanence. Its simplicity makes it universal, a structure defined not by technology, but by trust in human capability. A design that assumes nothing except that men and women will work together under pressure and get it right. In lectures, modern engineers use it as a case study in resilience. They note that while materials have advanced, aluminum alloys, composite decking, robotic fabrication, none have replaced the core idea, standardized modularity. The Bailey remains the benchmark for speed and reliability. Every disaster response bridge still measures itself against it. On an overcast morning in Dorset, a handful of retired Royal Engineers gather at the old test site by the River Avon. They watch a demonstration of a new lightweight Bailey variant being assembled by recruits. The rhythm of bolts and hammers sounds familiar. One of the veterans remarks quietly, "Still fits the pins." Another nods, "Still holds the load." A few meters away, a plaque stands on a brick plinth. Its inscription is brief. Sir Donald Coleman Bailey, 1901 to 1985. Designer of the Bailey Bridge. His work carried the armies of freedom across Europe and the people of peace beyond it. The river moves beneath in the same steady flow it had in 1940, when Bailey first watched his model flex under sandbags and light. Nothing in that moment suggested immortality, only function, precision, and faith in a simple mechanism. Yet from those panels of steel came a quiet inheritance, the ability to cross, to connect, to continue. In every clatter of bolts and every crossing rebuilt after disaster, his bridge still speaks, not in triumph, but in purpose. Its voice is steady, metallic, and calm. The sound of the 20th century building the 21st. Fade to black. The echo of hammers fades, leaving only the river, unchanged since the day a crazy design became the backbone of progress.